Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Podcast, episode 84. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And to cut to the chase, you probably clicked on some clickbait title to get here, and we're going to explain far more than you think today.
I expect that as well.
I have kept Eric in the dark on all of the data that is sitting in front of me.
Well, yeah, because it was supposed to be a simple thing.
Originally, this was going to be a very simple topic, but then it kind of bloated as I realized everything we could do. So I shackled some patrons to desks and forced them to work while paying us money to do so, and I think it worked out for everybody's benefit. So without any further ado, let's not just find out what's the most expensive army in 40K, but also what's the cheapest, what's the biggest, what's the smallest, and everything in between.
All right, sounds good.
Alright, so the original plan was to do an interesting clickbaity, hey, what's the most expensive faction?
Right. It was supposed to be easy and pretty simple, and then you're talking about multiple sets of data, and I'm like, this has become substantially larger than it was supposed to. What's that scope creep like?
Yeah, so I realized that in order to find that fact out, I would need to know how much every kit in every army cost, every army as a whole, the size of the armies, etc. And I could just extrapolate all sorts of data.
You didn't have to. We could have just said we did that and then didn't.
I could have just checked the most likely candidates, but I wouldn't have gotten all the interesting results we did.
That is true. I am rather interested in what the truth is, as opposed to what I expected we were just gonna do anyways.
So first up, because all statistics are lies, we have to talk about the limits of what got into the pool here. This is what we're working within the rules of. We are only talking about Games Workshop models. We are not talking about Forge World, because otherwise it's going to be very boring when I tell you Titans are the most expensive faction.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those, anytime it comes with price involved, Forge World has to be excluded, or it's just a massive outlier.
And it would skew the data for things like Tau, where suddenly you've got a single model that costs thousands of dollars.
Yeah, so that is for the best to remove that major outlier.
So then we've got, I'm not including discount boxes. For the most part, there were a couple exceptions that had to sneak in for certain reasons because of how GW sells certain models.
Yeah, because there are some models that you can't really get.
Only exist in combos, yeah.
Yeah.
Those exist, they're in here. We tried to avoid discount boxes.
Okay, if it's needed, it's there. But if there's any other alternative...
It is not.
Okay.
We're using MSRP for GW's website for all data points.
And in USD, just because it's easier for us, and it doesn't really matter what the exact number is, so much as all of the data is sharing a commonality.
Yeah, so no Kiwi cents, no Aussie fun bucks, no Dead Queen coins. It is all in burger bucks.
Wow, you managed to insult massive amounts of people on that. I applaud you.
Thank you. It's been a great week.
Yeah, it has, I'm sure.
For points, we're using the 2023 fall data slate points that just came out, obviously. And when we are discussing points versus prices, we tried to match unit sizes because they can vary points per model depending on the unit size currently. We tried to match them to the amount of models that are in a box.
Right. I guess I did forget about the fact that there's some weird breakdowns now of what you can actually field in a unit versus what you buy in a box.
Yeah, so there's also more stuff when we get into Imperium. If one of your troops can be built as a captain, and that's the only way to buy a captain, Custodes, Grey Knights, etc., we just split the box in a way where the captain is X% of the price and the troops are the rest.
That's fair. Not quite as simple as just look at shop, get number, put in Excel cell, and go to next. There's a bit more.
Yeah, and we tried to make sure we covered everything in the indexes, used that as basically our master list of what was considered a unit. I did have help for all of this. The idea of this episode by hand was going to kill me, so I enlisted a bunch of the patrons to help out. Thank you to all of you who paid us money and then did work.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, enjoyment is its own reward.
Oh, true. I paid them an exposure. We put them on screen.
No.
We're even Stevens now, right?
Yeah. Moving on.
And as a final thing, yes, there is possible typos in this data. I checked through it real quick to make sure I caught the very basics of a couple 150s instead of 105, stuff like that. But I cannot help the fact that my free help may have made typos.
I love the fact that you're throwing them under the bus, even if it was a typo that you made.
Oh, absolutely. And as a final thing, all of this data will be available in the YouTube description, the audio episodes, show notes, all that jazz. I will make a copy of it available for read-only purposes that you can copy on your own and edit as you see fit. I think there is a lot of cool stuff to come out of this data. I've got like 5 episode ideas whirring around my head right now on ways this data could get used for future episodes, all free for whoever wants to look at it.
Yeah, should be interesting. I've got one more question, though. We're breaking these down into the factions, but there are models that are shared between factions, specifically looking at Space Marines. Do you include that in both of them as like Rhino?
Rhino is the easy one. Chaos Space Marines has it, Space Marines has it, Grey Knights have it, Custodes have it. 1 Rhino is priced in each. They're all ripoffs at MSRP.
Well, yeah, but same kind of thing for like Primaris Librarian or whatever. That's every army that has it, it's in its army. Okay.
Well, I didn't break it down, Pat. We'll get into Space Marines. Space Marines broke this data set. Space Marines is stupid.
I was kind of wondering, I have not seen the data yet. It's hidden from me.
The data kind of proves how dumb Space Marines is. You will enjoy.
I know that it's a pain in the ass to actually figure out where things are on GW's website for Space Marines sometimes, so I can only imagine. But I don't have to imagine because you've done the work.
All right, without any further ado, though, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of these stats.
Where do we want to start?
Let's start off with what I probably clickbaited people into with this. What's the cheapest army and what's the most expensive army in 40K?
Okay.
So obviously everyone for cheapest is going to scream Custodes at the top of their lungs.
Or Grey Knights.
Maybe, possibly, yes, but we're going to pretend you're not right specifically yet.
Well, I mean, we've kind of already done some of it, and it's not like those two factions have drastically changed in what they have available.
Well, there's also the idea of there are multiple ways to say cheapest and most expensive.
That's true.
A lot of people mean the same thing. It is points per dollar. That is clearly what most people mean when they ask if an army is cheap or expensive to buy.
Right. Like, how much money do you have to spend to get an amount of points to play?
Yeah. But there is the idea of what army could you spend the most money on and still need to buy more of? And there's the idea of what army could you spend the least on and own the entire range?
Okay. I'm assuming you mean like one of each unit type thing, not I can field literally any army composition I want.
Yeah, well, for the sake of this, we'll limit it to one of everything so I don't have to start counting out epic heroes on duplicates, stuff like that.
Okay. I think that'll give the rough idea kind of thing.
Yeah. Triple it and then remove a couple, whatever, dozens or hundreds of dollars, depending on how many epic heroes are in the faction.
Yeah, and then just add a couple extra just for the battle line.
So that's the different ways you can look at it. But for points per dollar, obviously that's what 90% of people assume we're going to talk about. Let's start there. And Eric, let's have you take a moment through editing magic to go through, tell me what you think the 5 cheapest and the 5 most expensive factions are, preferably in order, starting with the cheapest.
I think the cheapest is Grey Knights.
Okay.
And then Custodes. And now is when I'm like, I'm pretty sure the Knights, Imperial Knights and then Chaos Knights work out in there, but I'm not so sure.
Who do you have for 5th?
And then I go with Thousand Sons for a similar reason to Grey Knights and Custodes of like they're a reasonably elite kind of army. But yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm fairly fucking confident that Grey Knights and Custodes are 1 and 2, and I'm pretty sure Grey Knights is still 1.
Okay, so let's finish this off before we get to the most expensive. So for the cheapest, again, no value boxes and no Forge World stuff. Cheapest is still Custodes.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually not that close.
Really?
Everything looks close, but this is not that close. Second place is Grey Knights. You were right. They are the top 2. You had them swapped.
Yeah, I think some of it might have been because Grey Knights is so good on their value box that I'm just like...
I think Custodes value box actually overweighs it because the one bad unit Custodes has for value, there's 2 of it in that value box, which would tank the average price.
Okay, yeah.
So anyway, the Custodes, to put it this way, without value boxes involved, if you're just buying MSRP Custodes at Games Workshop's website like an idiot.
Yeah.
You get 3.2 points per dollar, meaning if you spend $100, you get 320 points of custodians on average, just picking random kits.
All right. I mean, 3.2 is honestly pretty high from what I had expected.
Second place is Grey Knights at 292.
Ooh,
So if you spend $100, you only get 292 points of models.
I see what you're saying, because we're in these like smaller number field kind of thing. Like, oh, it's only 0.2.
Yeah, 3.2 versus 2.9 doesn't sound like much until you realize like the lower limit of this is probably 1 point something. Okay, so what did you have for third and fourth? It was the Knights. Which one was first?
I feel like I put Imperial Knights first, but that's just because I'm not familiar with Chaos Knights pricing.
You are correct, and they are absurdly close. Imperial Knights is third place at 2.76. Chaos Knights is 2.70 in fourth place.
All right.
But you can tell how much we've dropped off on this top four already.
I'm surprised that Custodes is as far away, but I feel like the difference between 4 and 5 is big.
Okay, so the fifth one is where we have to get into the asterisk, no real correct answer, but you are wrong.
That's fair.
Thousand Suns is either sixth or seventh, depending how you count.
Okay. So close, but
The fifth slot on a technical level of what I have in the sheet is Space Marines Chaptered.
really?
This is where Space Marines has to get explained to the audience and why it breaks the table.
That is fascinating. I thought it would be like one of the more expensive ones.
We can get into a lot of Space Marine stats compared to everybody else because there's some fascinating stuff here.
Okay.
Space Marines has a lot of data sheets. A lot, as we'll get to. There was no clean way to correctly split it up because of how weird it is for what's legal where and how. I made two primary categories I did all the math on. Space Marines Generic and then Space Marines Chaptered, meaning these data sheets lock you to a subfaction if you include one in your army.
So like these are the ones that if you're playing Space Wolves, you have to play Space Wolves.
Right. I did further break them down in tables, but didn't pull all the math out for specifically Space Wolf only data sheets, Death Watch only data sheets. Because then we get into the weird ones of like, there are 15 characters for Ultramarines.
Right.
They're a Codex compliant chapter though. It gets real funky, and there was no clean way to do cuts. So I just lumped for all the stat stuff, Black Templars, Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Death Watch, Space Wolves, and all characters from Codex compliant chapters together in a pile called Space Marines Chaptered.
Okay.
So technically this isn't a playable army. Those subparts of this could be turned into playable armies. That's fifth place, and why I'm probably going to ignore it and tell you fifth place is actually Necrons.
Really?
Yes, which actually matches almost perfectly with the original $500 episode of I was able to do Custodes, Grey Knights, Space Marines, and Necrons, but I had access to discount boxes.
And that is exactly why I was like, it can't be Necrons. They should have been pretty mid in the expectation because they could have been cheap, but you didn't have the cheapest options with the boxes. So I was like, oh, they'll be like middle.
However, immediately after Necrons is Thousand Suns. So you were only off by one if we get rid of the Chapter Space Marines thing. You had a good thought there.
What were the price points for Necrons Thousand Suns?
So Space Marines Chaptered is 2.52. You get 252 points for $100 on average.
Okay.
Necrons is 2.43. Thousand Suns is 2.32. So 243 and 232. But you can already see Thousand Suns in sixth place.
Yeah, if we ignore the Space Marines thing, you go from Chaos Knights 4th of 270 to Necrons 243. That's massive.
And then just look at sixth place to first place. Thousand Suns, 2.32. It's almost 100 points per $100 lower than Custodes is.
Yeah, there is like a pretty clear gaps in Custodes is off on its own.
Yeah, Grey Knights is right there with Custodes too. But those two are off on their own. And it's why they're so commonly referred to as great for beginners. Because, like, you won't die trying to buy them. Especially when we get value boxes, and they both have very good value boxes.
I was slightly concerned about that just because, like, they have insane value boxes. And then I was like, well, yeah, but their individual models are not that unreasonable. And there also aren't that many, like, oh, you have to buy this character who's $150.
Yeah. So this is where, even up here in what I consider the easy boring section, there's some interesting stats, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, let's blow up your list here. I think our entire audience, if everyone paused right now and guessed, no one would get these five in this order because there are some weird upsets. Let's start off with what you think is the cheapest of these five, and we'll build up to what you believe the most expensive one is. What'd you pick?
Yeah, so I went with Leagues of Votann And this one's difficult because the army is small. It doesn't have that many data sheets. All of the actual models are expensive to buy. Some of them are ridiculous looking at the Land Fortress. But they are supposed to be a more elite army, and they kind of were. And then a bunch of points got rolled back from the update because they were bad. I feel like because you're kind of forced to play a lot of units now, comparatively to what you would expect from an elite styled army, and all of them are pretty expensive, this seems like it should be up there.
All right, so what's number 4?
I went with Guard, and this is...
It's going to be a common one in most people's top 5.
Yeah, and it's like where? I don't know, man. Let's just put it at 4 because there are some decent value things, but there's also like, you gotta have a lot. So it's tough because some of the tanks are like, not too bad. That's my expectation, at least.
But then you get to like the terrible kits like buying Kriegsmen.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to number 3.
So I went with Sisters. I expect it to be pretty high up there just because a lot of the cheap models points wise, and they are not cheap kits to buy.
It's a very fair call.
And honestly, the next one as well of Genestealer cults, you gotta field a bunch of things, and they ain't cheap.
Famously expensive. All right, and then number 1, we know the obvious answer. Who do you have? It's AdMech.
It's AdMech.
And similar to Custodes, it's not close.
Yeah.
They're off by 0.1 compared to second place, which is not hugely far like Custodes was, but it's not like a hair between them. They are solidly last place.
And like the lower you go on these scale, the more difficult it is to have a gap.
Yeah, because you're approaching 0. You can't.
You can't go under 0. They're not. So it's, you know, it's one of those that just because of how the data is going to be working out, there is a floor that you can't really go past.
All right, so let's do this top 5 in order then. So 5th place, you did not guess, and I think a lot of people won't have guessed it, is Drukhari.
No shit.
Without value boxes, it is shockingly bad.
Wow.
I was actually shocked it made the bottom 5, and
I guess some of it is like, I'm assuming you didn't cheat with like when you buy the boats, you use...
Nope, no cheating. That really brings home how expensive Drukhari is.
Yeah, a lot of the value that you can get from buying Drukhari is normally from kit bashing and making it really stretch to what you want.
And when we get out of the points section, the points per dollar part, there are some other interesting facts about Drukhari specifically. It's going to get interesting. So, from a points per dollar value, it's not very good. We're already at 1.94.
Oh god, I was gonna say, have we dropped below?
We're below 2.
Oh, that's not...
It's
that's
not
great.
alone below 2.
That's not great.
So, number 4, you did guess on the list, it's Leagues of Votann.
All right.
Leagues of Votann is sitting at 1.70.
Holy shit.
It's bad. We're at the 4th worst.
Even with the old points previous, like they still would have... Okay, yep.
So next up, in number 3, you didn't even guess it. It's Tau.
All right, then. I'll be honest, I don't know much about pricing for Tau.
I knew there was specific bad examples in Tau, and it didn't really click with me until one of the patrons was filling it out and talking about how disgustingly bad it was. And then I saw it was in 3rd to last when I put the data together, and I had to double check the math.
It's not surprising, but part of it is because I always am just like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's about the price of like an expensive Gundam, so sure. You know, like I've got this like rationale behind why it's expensive and just ignore it.
The worst part is a lot of its worst offenders are things you buy a lot of. It's not obscure stuff holding the price down. Crisis suits.
Yeah.
Broadsides. Breachers and fire warriors. It's like the whole way down. Everything has abysmally bad rates. So yeah, Tau, shocking 3rd place.
What were they at? Ended up
1.62.
I'm honestly worried about how low it's gonna go.
2nd place. What do you think it'll be? Now that you've heard the others and you see what's on your list still.
I mean, I still think it's Genestealer.
It's Sisters.
Is it really?
Which is shocking for 2 reasons, because I already told you number 1 is AdMech.
Yeah.
So Sisters is in 2nd, and Genestealers is not in the bottom 5. With how bad of an investment Genestealers is without value boxes. Again, the value box is not saving Genestealers here. It has an amazing value box, which is quite possibly the only reason it's an affordable army. It is still outside of the top 5.
That just seems so wrong. I mean, I know Sisters is expensive now, but...
Sisters is horrendous.
The fact that Gene Stealers isn't as bad as Drukhari is wild to me.
It's only off by a hair. Gene Stealers is 1.95, Drukhari is 1.94.
All right. I mean, it's still not like I expected it to be second, but like you're not really getting a deal from Gene Stealers. Don't worry.
It's still bad, but it shows how many others are equally awful or worse. So yeah, Sisters in second, 1.59. And AdMech in last place,
Is it under 1.5?
1.49.
Oh, hell yeah. Let's go.
If you spend $100 on random AdMech kits, you are not expected to get 150 points.
Wow. Yay. Everybody loves AdMech. Fucking hell. That's not good.
Obviously, a lot of what we didn't cover in this top 5, bottom 5 is pretty expectable stuff that's not that interesting. But even there's some interesting ones. Guard. How many people in our audience thought Guard was going to be in the bottom 5?
Yeah. I mean, it seems right. You have to field a bunch of Guard that are not cheap kits and are cheap to field.
So out of 22 factions, because I split Space Marines into chaptered and generic, Guard is in 12th. They are fat middle.
Wow.
That's how bad some of these are.
I mean, I'm assuming that it's because some of them are like the tanks kind of thing.
We'll get into like what is best in each army to buy. And yes, the tanks are holding up Guard.
Yeah.
Specifically, Leman Russes and the Baneblade and Rogel Dorn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't think of that one. But I was like, the Leman Russes have to be solid value.
One of the things helping Guard is out of 60 data sheets, every Baneblade build and every Leman Russ build is different now.
Right?
Because of that, because they also have good value of points per dollar spent, they lift Guard out of the gutters. If you tried to play Infantry Guard and banned all of your tanks, they'd fall right down with AdMech, Drukhari, all those at the bottom.
Yeah.
But Guard is the whole range. You can't get picky.
Well, yeah, and I mean, honestly, like, a lot of Guard players play it because of the tanks.
So these factions don't even make it to 2 points per dollar. Ready?
Yeah.
AdMech, Sisters, Tau, Votan, Drukhari, obviously. Gene Stealers?
Yep.
Orcs.
What?
Orcs is pretty famous for horde builds are expensive,
That's true. Even there are some that are really good.
but there are some that are horrendous. Think of how bad it is when you buy your junkyard stuff.
Yeah.
They're all almost dollar per point. They're so bad.
I was just thinking that same thing. I was like, what about the planes?
And then the other one that's under 2, Death Guard. Famously in 8th edition, the cheap starter faction, the one that you picked like you did Necrons in 9th because it was cheap because it had all the value boxes. None of those exist anymore. Death Guard kits are expensive. For how elite the army is supposed to be, they just got a bunch of point drops because their rules suck, and now they fell down below 2 points per dollar.
That actually does make some sense just because we're not doing value box type stuff and the points drop was needed, but that doesn't help this part. And it kind of makes sense that they're on the more expensive side because they are intricate kits and there's a bunch of detail, but I'm surprised that they're that bad off.
Yeah, it's rough how low they are. So yeah, there is some shocking stuff the whole way through this data if you look at the long form stuff. I'm sure on the YouTube, Borrelio can put up like a quick, here's the whole breakdown.
That's honestly super disappointing for Death Guard, not just because of like value, but it kind of gives another stark reminder of how they're not really elite in current iteration.
Yeah, you're right. It's both. They don't have that elite feel.
Right? Like, at least they have an army rule kind of thing now that like feels like they're doing something, but
They have an identity again, you're right, but it's not elite.
they've lost the elite.
They have their new army rule thing. Technically, it's a detachment rule and should have been an army rule. We'll have that discussion later. But for right now, they have their quote-unquote new army rule. They've got a faction identity and fantasy to work towards.
And that's great, but
When they get a codex later, if they fix some data sheets up and if they polish up a couple stat lines, they could regain their elite status.
and then not be at this sub $2.
Points per dollar.
Yeah.
So there's your most expensive and your cheapest, but boy, is there a lot of more fun data in here. The other one is, hey, what would be the most expensive army to field and what would be the cheapest army to field if you wanted to buy one of everything? And then you could scale it up for 3, whatever. Would you like to make your quick bets here?
Well, I mean, you go with what has the most, right? Like,
Obviously.
Leagues of Votan is not. So we're looking at the ones that are big, like Space Marines, Eldari, maybe Orcs.
It's up there. Do you want me to do the breakdown for you?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right, so let's do worst first, because this will be shockingly bad.
Oh, yeah?
Remember, no Forge World for one of these, so that's less shocking. Last place, Leagues of Votann. It only costs $705 to buy the whole range at MSRP.
Yeah.
That's only 1,200 points on the dot.
The only thing that would be less data sheets is Harlequins, but like doesn't exist, so.
I actually have the Harlequins breakdown if we want to do it for technicality.
Yeah.
Harlequins sits at 695 points total.
Hell yeah. All 9 data sheets.
And then that'll cost you $289, which is actually a shockingly good 2.4.
It's not terrible.
It's not bad at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's because you have a quarter of an army.
And they're a very elite army.
Yeah.
So 2.4 is actually not that surprising when you remember their Custodes equivalents, but elves.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Harlequins actually would get a pretty good ratio if they still existed. Rest in peace. But yeah, the whopping 695 points of unique models.
Wow. Nailed it.
All 8 data sheets, baby.
Yeah.
So, last place for indexes that still exist, Leagues of Votann, 1,200 points, $705.
It's not surprising.
Second place, Custodes.
Okay. Oh, again, Forge World isn't.
Guess how much more money it costs to buy all the Custodes than Votann?
I have no idea.
$5 extra. Guess the point difference.
Probably like 450.
Over 1,200.
What?
It's 2,455 points.
Wow. That is also wild that you can't just have an army of Custodes at 2K. You have to cut things.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Because this is purchasable. Time out. It's time for us to discuss another part of this data.
Okay.
It is only 2,270 points. 2270.
Okay. Why?
Because certain units are not purchasable. There are units in the index that cannot be purchased in many armies. So
You're not meaning like you can't purchase it on GW's website. You mean like they were part of a bundle that no longer exists.
Or they literally only existed in Finecast and they stopped making this model 2 decades ago. See half of Space Marines when we get there. Space Marines ruined all of our data points whenever I tried anything. So Custodes, the unpurchasable kit is the Venerable Contemptor Dreadnought. It is no longer anywhere on GW's website. They don't sell it.
Well, because I mean, it's going to be dead.
Yeah, it's
not long for this world.
Yeah, so because that one is missing, technically it's $710 for 2,270 points.
Not bad, not bad.
But that will become more of a thing when we get to things like Grey Knights and stuff where you've got multiple missing data sheets. Because Grey Knights has 6 that do not exist.
6.
There are 6 things in Grey Knights you cannot buy. Brother Captain Stern, the Brotherhood Champion, Brotherhood Chaplain, because it's a Terminator armor, Brotherhood Tech Marine, because it's an old Marine and they don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
The Grand Master.
Really?
You have to kit bash one. It's not a kit. It's not an official GW model. They had one many years ago. And then the Servitors, which just aren't there because the old Finecast Tech Marine doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Anyway, so second place Custodes, third place, cheapest thing to buy into, Genestealer Cults, only $903 to buy all 1,760 points.
Oh.
And then fourth place Drukhari, the last one under $1,000 to buy, $914.50 will buy you everything purchasable, and it's 1,775 points. There are 5 data sheets you cannot purchase.
Okay, because I was going to say, it feels like that's not quite right, but I guess there aren't that many Drukhari models.
Out of 24 data sheets Drukhari has access to,
yeah,
5 of those cannot be bought.
Wow.
Over 20% of Drukhari is not purchasable.
Weird.
Yeah. Rakarth, Finecast character, not purchasable anymore. Mandrakes, not purchasable anymore. Grotesques, not purchasable anymore. Court of the Archon, not purchasable anymore. The Beastmaster, not purchasable anymore. Everything I just named is Finecast. They're all gone. Drukhari needs a range update. And when the range update happens, it needs to not be expensive-ass models that keep it down in the bottom 5.
I mean, I feel like it's going to be.
The worst part is Drukhari's ratio would get worse if you could still buy these models, because Grotesques are a minimum of 3. It was a single Finecast model.
Oh, no.
They would have been lower in that bottom 5.
I mean, luckily, you kit bash and steal other models and...
Oh, you kit bash a lot in Drukhari. It's why I kind of had forgotten how bad officially buying Drukhari would be if it was even a thing anymore.
Right.
You have to kit bash in Drukhari. It's just assumed that you kit bashed in Drukhari, which I think is why I like it as a hobby army. But it also kind of makes it shocking for how bad it would be if you tried to legally acquire real Drukhari.
Yeah.
And then we get into a bunch of boring stuff like Grey Knights and the Knights, and we're into things that cost over $1,000 to buy the range. Let's get to the more expensive end of things.
Okay.
So, the top six. Sixth place, Eldari. It's going to cost you 2.8 grand to buy 6,550 points.
I'm kind of surprised it's that low. Surprisingly, they have a lot of models, but like they've got less sheets than orcs and obviously less than Space Marines.
They have more data sheets than orcs by 3.
Do they really?
60 versus 57.
All right then.
Eldari is a Space Marine sized army, in quotes, because nothing is a Space Marine sized army. But it is what I would consider a complete army.
Yeah, okay.
And then orcs is just below it at 57 data sheets. But anyway, orcs would cost you 3.3 grand to buy 6,515 points instead of 50. It's slightly less points for an extra $500.
Like I said, there's some great deals, but there's also all of the fucking planes and shit.
Yeah.
And you ain't doing well on that.
Here's one that just missed our terrible ratio. Chaos Demons.
Yeah.
$3,671 to buy 7,645 points.
I thought that was going to be one of your curveballs.
It managed to be just above the bottom group, but only just at 2.08.
It is weird because Chaos Demons is like 4 things in one that are just not all individually enough and whatever.
There's all sorts of issues if you break up Chaos Demons. I don't even want to get into that mess.
Yeah, I was going to start you down that rabbit hole and I was like, hold on a second. Let's just, we've got enough problems already with Space Marines. Let's not.
We'll be back to Chaos Demons for a different problem they have in a later stat. Third place, Astra Militarum, Imperial Guard, whatever you want to call them. $3,879 to buy 8,585 points.
Wow, that's a lot of points.
Are you ready to use this as a segue into our next stat that'll be really fun? Second place is Space Marines. First place is also Space Marines.
Wow.
Space Marines has a grand total of 218 data sheets between generic and chaptered ones.
Not doubling up?
Technically, there's a couple double ups because of things like Black Templars, legally distinct bullshittery.
Okay, but you're not like doubling up on like rhinos.
No, because a rhino is generic. It's not in the chaptered section.
Okay.
An impulsor is in both because Black Templars had to get a special impulsor for some godforsaken fucking reason.
Okay, so yeah, there is some only technically unique, but if the data sheet says it's unique, it's unique. Like that's what the rules say.
We had to make rules.
Yeah.
So Space Marines takes second place and first place for most money you can spend and keep buying it. This should shock nobody because Space Marines is a subscription service for idiots. Thank you for funding this game so I can play it.
Which of the subchapters is the worst?
I didn't break down subchapter by subchapter. The data allows for it, but I gave up at a certain point. Chaptered costs more than generic.
That makes sense.
It does, because that's where all of your $30 character, $30 character, $30 character over and over happens.
And I feel like it's gotta be Space Wolves.
Space Wolves is 35 data sheets alone.
Right. It's bigger than a lot of other armies.
I'm glad you brought this up, Eric, because this is us segueing into the next point. How stupidly large is Space Marines, you may be thinking to yourself? Well, I've got the answer today.
24,000 points.
Including out of print stuff, just to get the final number that no one can fight against. 27,515 points. That would be if you wanted one copy of every Space Marine that is currently legal in whatever.
Not bad.
So, let's talk about this for a moment. Space Marines, as a grand total, would cost you $8,848.11 to collect. To put it in perspective for you, you could buy one copy of every datasheet legal in this game for $48,000. Over a fifth of this game's dollars are in Space Marines.
Yeah. I mean, that's how many data sheets comparatively is everything else.
Let's get into the fun stats.
Right? Like,
so we were just talking about Space Wolves, right? Having a lot of data sheets.
Yeah.
If you only built your Space Wolf army out of kits only available to Space Wolves, your Wolfen, your Wolf Guard, your Wolves, your Space,
things that are not generic Space Marines.
Yeah, they have their own stupid name.
Yeah.
Not counting the rest of Space Marines in this equation. We'll count them once for any other Space Marine. Space Wolves is the 10th largest faction in the game out of 21. There are 35 datasheets in it. There are more Space Wolf exclusive datasheets than Death Guard, Sisters, Admech, Thousand Sons, Grey Knights, Drukhari, World Eaters, Gene Stealers, Custodes, Votan, Knights.
Is it more than Tau?
No, Tau beat it by 2 datasheets.
Insane. Absolutely fucking insane.
There are too many goddamn Space Marines. So, to put this another way, if you just look at the points, you take like a considerable sized army, Sisters. There is over 1,000 more points of Space Wolf only models.
Yeah.
If you get to Space Marines, it's a factor of 10 difference.
So it is interesting that you lay it out this way for many reasons, but one of the ones that I've always had this like, why do Space Marine subchapters get so much special like rules kind of stuff?
It is because they are literally more cared about than literally half of the armies with lore.
Well, yeah, but there are as many or more unique models for their sub-factions as other entire army factions. So yeah, they should get special rules because there are enough units to deserve special rules. It makes sense. It's fucking bullshit, but it makes sense.
Let's talk about this from a datasheet count standpoint. There are 997 index datasheets that are not Forge World.
Hey, that's not terrible.
218 of those are Space Marines.
Cool. What if you add in Chaos Space Marines?
It's different. I'm not going to do that.
Is it though?
That's bloat. It's an extra 49.
Like, is it though? They put spikes on it.
So, Space Marines has more datasheets than Grey Knights, Drukhari, World Eaters, Genestealer Cults, Adeptus Custodes, Leagues of Votan, Imperial Knights, and Chaos Knights combined. All of those factions combined is less datasheets. You could add in Thousand Sons and you only beat them out by about 10.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of those are Knights. Like, you don't expect that to be that many.
Knights are only 10 datasheets and 11 datasheets, correct.
But you can also look at it as like, okay, how about if you use like the larger, not Eldari or Orcs, but like Tau, Drukhari, Death Guard, Demons.
You're listing specific ones you want?
Yeah, like those added together should probably be roughly
Tau, Drukhari, Death Guard, Tyrannid.
Yeah.
Those 4 is half. It's 139.
Okay, adding Chaos Demons, I guess.
194. We're almost there.
All right. That's not bad. So really, you need to have like Eldari, Orcs, and Tyranids. And Necrons, maybe.
Let's do it this way. Ready for this one? IG, Eldari, Orcs. The top 3 factions that are not Space Marines.
Yeah.
60, 60, 57, 177 data sheets. Space Marine still beats it.
And the 4th one would be...
A 4th one would bring us over. That would be Chaos Demons, even though out of 55 data sheets, a ridiculous number are named demons.
Okay, that's actually a fascinating one. If you have the number, how many of Chaos Demons are not named characters?
All right, so even generic characters I'm going to add in this pool.
Sure.
Let's just go with what percentage of it is not a character.
Yeah.
Only 21 data sheets in demons are not characters. I might be off by 1 or 2. I'm doing this by memory. 60% of the sheets are essentially characters.
Nice. That's a healthy army.
Chaos Demons is through and through a fantasy army where most of the data sheets are characters.
I feel like we're further and further away from having the split that we're supposed to have.
Yeah, so that has been There Are Too Many Goddamn Space Marines with Brad. Now, to get into another fact, let's talk about out-of-print data sheets for a moment.
Okay.
These are data sheets that are in the index but are not sold. Space Marines once again screw up everything. As we record this, all of those new revealed Space Marines are not for sale yet. They will be in hopefully like 2 or 3 weeks here, but they haven't been announced as for sale yet.
Oh, come on, give it to them.
So, with those not for sale yet, the current numbers is there are, out of 113 chaptered Space Marine units, 22 of them are not purchasable. Out of the 105 generic Space Marine unit types, 35 of them are not available. There are more out-of-print data sheets in the Space Marine Index than there are any other army except for like 4 in total in their index. That's some fucking bloat.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? Stop people from playing it? Come on, you can't do that.
God forbid we get rid of old Marines finally.
That's a lot, honestly.
The number will change after the codex comes out because we know the codex is calling a lot of these data sheets and primarisizing a lot of the others. So a lot of these dead sheets should disappear, but it will still probably be a double-digit number.
And that's honestly just kind of It's just kind of fucked up. I don't know. It's just weird to have that many things that are legally rule enforceable kind of things that like you just can't get.
Yeah, and again, the number will go down shortly, but it will still be high. The highest number outside of Space Marines, for those wondering, is Eldari with 7.
Okay.
And they're almost all old Finecast characters. Grey Knights was 6, but again, like we talked about, old Finecast weird kits that you kit bash nowadays. But the worst offenders, like from a amount of datasheet standpoint, is Grey Knights and Drukhari. Those two are number 1 and 2 on the actual percent of their codex that you cannot purchase.
Yeah, because like there's only 25 or whatever, and 5 of them aren't. So yeah.
And again, we're ignoring the fact that Space Marines is a bloated number currently.
Yeah, I can't say, like, it's tough because it feels fucked up. And then, like, I think about other games that we've played, like Magic. We played a shitload of Modern, played Legacy. You can't buy those fucking cards.
99% of the format can only be bought secondhand, yeah.
So, like, you know what? It feels fucked up, and it kind of is, but I've accepted it elsewhere. So, like, you know, try not to be a hypocrite.
And this is Warhammer. 3D print models you want.
Exactly. I mean, I'd say the same thing for Magic, but,
Do we want to get into some other fun data points I've gathered up here?
Sure.
So in my little Google Sheets Excel wannabe document, I looked at some other stuff. I have the best points per dollar kit in each army with an asterisk. So I sculpted this list because for a lot of these, the answer was stupid if you just went raw.
What do you mean?
It would end up being like Magnus, where you buy 1 copy.
Oh, okay.
So I went with a repeatable kit, and then I took aircraft and Titanic units out of the equation when they don't make any sense, because you shouldn't be spending money on a fucking name your favorite overpriced piece of garbage aircraft in this edition.
Oh, it's so sad.
So we'll talk about every army's best kit to buy if you only care about getting value per dollar and you want to get 3 copies of it, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's organize this by the best points per dollar to worst.
Okay.
And I will unhide my special snowflake Marines. Okay, so...
Let me think. Best kit. Is it just knights?
No. This is per army. I didn't do this overall.
Oh, okay.
You could technically take this and do it overall. The best kit I have is an Auspex video that happened like 3 hours before we recorded this. It's the Primaris Crusaders.
Really?
Because you get like 1 billion D models and points per kit.
Okay.
I think it's like a 20 model unit or some garbage, or 10 or whatever. It ends up being 4.66 points per dollar.
That's a lot lower than I expected.
That's still crazy high, because that would mean you could make a 2,000 point army for $500 easily if you had that ratio.
I know, but like, we're talking about the best thing.
Yeah.
And it's still only at that value.
We've had 2 price increases since that episode aired. We're screwed. The sequel to that episode is going to be interesting.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, you could do it easily. And I'm like, well, we didn't have that much trouble.
I had that much trouble. Do you remember? I almost couldn't make Space Marines work.
That's true.
And I had access to the value boxes.
Yeah.
So, getting into them, let's cover all of the Baskin Robin flavors. Death Watch is the Fortis Kill team. I don't even know what that is, but I trust whoever did the Death Watch page. 3.83 points per dollar.
Okay.
Black Templars is the Primaris Crusaders, obviously, which is also the sweep for all of Space Marines. Blood Angels is Sanguinary Guard, to nobody's shock. That kit is not that expensive, and those models in play are very expensive in points.
Yeah.
It's at 2.91, still under 3.
This is not boding well for our return to the $500, but continue.
This episode is a prequel to it.
Yeah.
It's not next week or anything. Calm down, guys. It'll be like 6 months out. Maybe not that long. Then Dark Angels is Deathwing Knights at 3.91.
Okay.
That kit is one that I know a lot of people in the $500 episode said I should have looked into, because you can apparently spam that one out to make a legal army because it builds so many types of expensive models.
I do know that that one is one of the more, it gives you a bunch of options kind of thing.
If a Space Marine makes it in, it will probably be a Deathwing army, is my guess. And then for Space Wolves, it's Grey Hunters at 2.83.
What?
Which is not great.
That's really the best that they got?
Yep.
Wow.
So, Custodes. This is where we get into the interesting good news one, which just keeps on winning. Custodes is the winningest army in the stats. Custodes' best value kit is the Warden's at 4.5 points per dollar. Why this is such a win is the Custodes value box does not include Wardens. It's one of the holes in the collection.
That is vastly good news.
You do not want your best value kit to be what's in your value box, because that means your value box is devaluing your best value kit.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's like you're getting the value box and then you don't need the best value kit anymore.
Yeah, so that would be bad to find. Hint for a later one. Now, a lot of these best value kits are still very bad data sheets, I'm aware. That tends to be how you become
Right.
good points per dollar. It means you're overcosted.
Yeah, I was like, we're expecting most of these to be weaker units because they're overcosted points in game.
Yeah, but Custodes doesn't have much in the way of overcosted data sheets. They're just disgustingly good right now.
It's one of those where it's like, if you're a super elite army, it doesn't really matter if you're overcosted by 1 or 2 points.
Custodes changes what the best model is so often. Wardens were the best thing 3 minutes ago. It's fine if they're a little overcosted right now, whatever.
Yeah.
So then we go to Grey Knights. It's Inceptor/Purgation Squad. It's the strike box, but specifically whatever the most expensive build is. Those two are tied right now. That's still over 4, so you're at 4.15.
Okay.
Then to Knights, it's Armigers for Imperial Knights, and for Chaos Knights, it's War Dog, specifically build Brigands because they're the most expensive War Dog variant.
Yeah.
3.3 and 3.5 for how much they cost.
Not really shocking, but...
And then Space Marines Chaptered is obviously summarized as the Primaris Crusaders. Necrons, the Doomsday Arc, which is at 3.5 points per dollar.
Really?
It's honestly a pretty nice thing considering it's not in the value box. And I know some people are down on the Doomsday Arc right now. I get it.
But it's not, like, bad.
No, it's not the worst.
Yeah.
It's not like it has been in previous editions. It is the worst kit imaginable. Fuck that ribcage. It is a pain in the ass in every way.
You and your hatred for the ribcage, I think it's cool.
You ask a Necron player who's built it and painted it. You try getting a fucking brush in there.
Just use an airbrush. Easy.
You try getting an airbrush to blow paint between those ribs.
Just dunk it in the paint bucket. Easy.
Anyway, moving on. Thousand Suns, Scarab Occult Terminators, obviously 3.58.
If it's anything else, you've fucked up somewhere.
The thing that was better, I took out of the equation. Exalted Sorcerers are better, but they're weird and cheaty, and I didn't want to use them.
Really?
Because there's 3 in a box. Exalted Sorcerers is the weirdest box ever. It is 3 individual characters per box.
What?
Dude, that's an episode. We'll talk about that one day. One of the best kits for bits ever, but a confusing ass kit.
All right. Yeah. Is that why you had a bunch of like headdress things left over that you were kit bashing? Okay. I remember you had just a table full of them. Like, oh, I wonder which one. And I was like, you know what? I'm sure he just bought too many things. I'm not going to question.
Magnus is worse than Sots. Wow. Okay. Armon on disc is actually a better ratio than Magnus when we're going to name characters, which we shouldn't for this, but Scarab Occult Terminators beat both.
Scarab Occult Terminators are insane.
So anyway, back to the rest of the list. Eldari's Wraith Knights. Let's move on from that data point.
Get fucked.
World Eaters.
Oh no.
World Eaters didn't have much to choose from. They've only got 23 data sheets. Would you care to guess the best repeatable kit to buy? Reminder, you don't want it to be in your value box because it would mean that your value box is making your rest of your purchases forever worse.
Okay. Now I have to think of what's in the value box.
It's the Khorne Berserkers that have 20 of them in the value box.
The value box is basically a kit with some extras.
It's Khorne Berserkers. They're the cheapest thing you can buy in World Eaters.
How exciting.
They're at a 3.1 value, which is not bad for a raw box. The problem is they are the value box.
Yeah, they are.
So then, generic Space Marines. I feel like this one is still cheating, but it's such a good ratio, I'm going to bring it up. It's Relic Terminators, which is 4.44. It's a huge, huge value. Relic Terminators is technically Plastic Forge World, I guess. It might be technically GW made for Horus Heresy, but I think it's Plastic Forge World. But that gets into the whole confusing old Marine thing.
I honestly don't know that one, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on much.
So, Relic Terminators is the Taurus and the Cataphracti armor sets.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They're the nice, cool-looking older Terminators that look like Horus Heresy Terminators. They're technically very cheap for how many points they are in game.
Okay.
So one of the cool winners is Chaos Space Marines. This gives me a little bit of hope for the $500 sequel. Chaos Space Marines' best kit for points per dollar is the Venom Crawler and Obliterators combo set that's online only because they're stuck together on the same sprue.
Oh, yeah. I love when those happen, when
They're one of those kits. And it's where Space Marines, I had to like ban some stuff that's only in value boxes because they look really good on paper until you remember it's because it's in a $150 box with a bunch of other shit. That's why it looks so cheap.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the Venom Crawler and Obliterator pair is 3.8 points per dollar, and is two of my favorite newer kits in the lineup. They're not in the current value box. Very interesting implications for if we go back to the $500 episode soon.
That means that kit is only like $85?
Something in there, yeah.
Maybe a little bit less?
For a Venom Crawler and 2 Obliterators. I like that kit a lot right now. Honestly, I own a Vashtor. I own a bunch of Demon Engines because I already play Thousand Suns.
Yeah?
I was just debating buying a pair of this and then just playing Blue Iron Warriors or something.
Blue Iron Warriors.
The Iron Warriors all have very shiny opalescent armor.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
They're the Astral Warriors. The Mystic Warriors.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all fine.
Okay, so IG. Technically, it would have been a Baneblade variant. I took them out of the equation.
Okay. I mean, good to know, but...
Second place, though, is very interesting.
So Lehman Russ?
It's the Lehman Russ. Specifically, like the Demolisher and the top tier ones. But the Lehman Russ Demolisher is a very, very good datasheet.
It is.
I hate the little chode cannon, and you should build any other Lehman Russ variant because they all look better. Don't want the 2-inch dick cannon.
But it's just so cute.
Yeah, get that McDonald's toy out of here. But IG, the value box ain't great, but it does include a lot of the non-tanks in the army, and I complain it should have a tank. But honestly, after seeing how cheap the tank kits are compared to their point cost, I'm kind of glad they went the way they did.
Nah, it's still fucking bullshit.
It's bullshit because I hate Cadians, but...
Well, no, it's bullshit because if you buy it trying to get into the army, it's not the army for the vast majority of players, and that's stupid.
It's only for Horde IG, and specifically Cadian Horde IG. Cadians are lame. If you like Cadians, I don't know, I pity you.
You're fine. At least you don't play Space Marines.
I guess. If you play Cadians and Ultramarines, how's that vanilla ice cream in your freezer?
It's a bit spicy.
It's a bit spicy.
It is nice to see a strong data sheet, making it on this part of the list.
Yeah, it's very nice because it's one of the proofs that Guard doesn't have to be overpriced all the time. And if you can get a good value on your infantry portion of your Guard army, then it means you won't be so bad off when you buy the rest.
Yeah.
So it gives me some interest in how Guard is set up with their value box in a way I hadn't respected before.
That's fair. It's still wrong, but that's fair.
Okay, talking about unplayable data sheets.
Oh yeah? Where are we moving to next?
Tyranid players out there.
Oh no.
What's the data sheet that just got shat on publicly by James Workshop? The Tyrannofex. They bumped it up like 40 points, took away its DR, and made it just absolutely trash.
Did not deserve that.
So, the Tyrannofex is the best points per dollar kit right now. It's been unplayable for 3 editions other than like 5 minutes at the beginning of 10th.
It's cool though.
It's a sweet kit. For how old it is, especially, it's held up well.
And like it fits with the new Tyranids as well too.
Yeah, the old Termagant versus the new one looks like a toy versus like a real model, whereas the Tyrannofex is very old and looks good.
I still love the old Termagants just because of like it's derpy cute kind of thing. But out of any models, if they're bad like value type thing, it's nice to have one that looks cool. At least you can put it on your shelf if you're never going to play it.
True. So then Chaos Demons, talking about not wanting your datasheet in your value box. Bloodletters, 3.5.
Sounds right.
And they're overpriced still, even with the point drop, in my opinion, as we talked about. Death Guard. It's what everyone knows it's going to be. It's Blight Haulers. It's the only cheap Death Guard kit. It's 3.44 because it's a cheap kit.
Just because of what has gone on with Death Guard lately, I was like, dude, I don't know, man. That army is insane and doesn't make any sense. But at least one commonality is staying.
It's sad how bad Death Guard is, but the Blight Hauler is honestly a pretty decent value still. It's just a shame it's like alone. All right, so I made one exception for Orcs. The best value kit you can repeat 3 times. I didn't ban it, even though it's Titanic, is Stompa.
Hell yeah, boy.
It beats everything out on this list. I didn't tell you the correct answer earlier because I wanted to save this. 5.71.
That sounds right. It's like 800 points.
It's so many points.
It's unplayable, but it's cool.
It's awful. That kit is terrible. Everything I've ever heard about it is that, like, it didn't even line up right 20 years ago when the kit came out. And, like, they're trying to hide that kit from existence.
No, it's an awful, awful, awful thing, but it's so cool.
So there you go. I could have chosen a non-meme answer, but for Eric, the real answer shines through.
I do wonder how the Morkanaut holds up.
The Morkanaut, I can tell you. Let's go to it.
So I think that's the expensive one right now. That's the towering, like 315 point.
Morkanaut is at 2.35. It's an acceptable one. It's not like the best by any means.
Yeah.
Gorkanaut is 3.13. Oh, I'm sorry. Gorkanaut's only 2 on the dot. I'm sorry. I was looking at Gaz.
Gaz is actually lower than I thought.
Yeah, Gaz at 3 is a little weird.
Gaz is actually pretty cheap for points.
He's not like 300 points anymore either.
He's lost some of his Primarchness.
True.
A little disappointing.
It just means they can bring out Demon Primarch-sized Gaz later.
Oh, hell yeah.
As he just keeps getting a bigger, orkier body.
That'd be cool.
So then, alright, let's get into the expensive ones. Genestealer Cults, hilariously, have a kit that's over 4.0 ratio with Aberrants, who are so horribly overcosted now at 4.11. Holy shit.
I should have known that because you were bitching about the Aberrants.
They got wrecked.
Luckily, at least there's so few models that, like, it'll rotate. They'll be good again eventually, just because you can't have the same thing at top dog always.
And I still think they're not terrible. It's just they ate too many points. They didn't have to go up that high, but I know they're playing safe. Drukhari Scourges beat out everything else. It's at only a 3.14, which kind of shows how screwed Drukhari is.
Again, it's because you kit bash the hell out of things. So, yeah.
Leagues of Votann, we're now into the danger zone, the bottom 4. Would you care to guess the best ratio in the Leagues of Votann?
No, I don't want to guess that.
It's the Hekaton Land Fortress, a $110 kit.
Oh my
It doesn't
God.
even break 2.0. It's at 1.95. Leagues of Votann is a very expensive army to purchase.
It is. And that kit should not be that expensive. I want to buy it. Not because I want to play Votann, because I think it's cool, but it's too fucking much money.
So now we're down to the bottom 3. And for Tau, we have the Storm Surge, barely getting over 2.16.
Wow.
And again, I let the Storm Surge in even though it's a massive model.
Oh, yeah.
So Tau has an extra problem, right? Their kits are really expensive, and the core of the army is expensive kits.
Yep.
Like, the Crisis Suits are a crazy bad ratio. Crisis Suits are $80 for a box of 3.
Holy shit.
How many Crisis Suits do you need to buy to play a proper list? Oh, I'm sorry. Crisis Suits actually beat the Storm Surge at a whopping 2.25. So I guess they are better than the Storm Surge after all.
Wow, shocking content from Warhammer here. It turns out Crisis Suits are better than Storm Surge.
It's just insane because, like, the old Start Collecting box, back when the Start Collecting box was like $85.
Yeah.
The joke was it's buying the Tau Crisis Suits and everything else in the box for $10.
Right.
And now the box is more expensive for the Crisis Suits, and they took them out of the intro box, which is also criminally expensive now.
Yeah.
It's so rough. Everything you look at, it's like, ooh, I want some broadsides. It's a 90-point unit that's $60. Ooh, I want just a breacher team. It's a 90-point unit that's $60.
Yeah.
Ooh, I want that big, sexy Riptide battle suit.
Yeah.
It's the exact same ratio. It's 180 points for $115.
Yeah. And, like, there isn't really any, like, if that's what you want to play, what are you going to do? Go play elves?
So, anyway, the final 2. Adeptus Sororitas Sisters is sitting with Paragon Warsuits at 2.67. Okay, whatever. AdMech. The boring answer is Castellan Robots because they're wildly overpriced. The more fun with AdMech is Uno reverse carding this question.
What's the worst ratio?
I can get you under 1.
You got to be able to get one of those, like, characters that costs 35 points and is... What do you got?
I can get us under a single point per dollar with either the Sulphur Hounds, which are 55 points for $60, or the Chicken Walker Iron Strider Ballistari, which is a whopping 50 points for $60. And now that they lowered the Dragoon, it's at a 1-to-1 ratio of 60 points to $60.
Wow.
The Dune Riders Fighter is 80 to 80. A Skitarii Marshal is $35 for a 35-point character.
That's where, yeah.
Which you will buy 3 of currently, most likely.
Yeah, that's the thing about leaders.
Cerberus Raiders, 60 points for $60. Electro Priests, 55 points for $55. It's like this all over the place. This army is ridiculous. This was kind of the jumping off point for this episode was last week when I mentioned that AdMech players should not be paying GW for their models because these prices are unacceptable. And I was like, is it even the worst? And yes, it is.
What's Call?
Belisarius Call is sitting at 185 points for $60. He's at above 3. He's at 3.08.
He's only $60. I mean, it's probably where he should be or a bit less, but I'm surprised they didn't price hike him to like 90.
Yeah, no, the Castellan robots, they come with the little duder, so technically their points are a little wonky to figure out because you would have to add the dude and them in the cost, whatever.
The little dude.
The character who you have to put with them to turn them on.
Oh, he comes with them?
Yeah, he's in the box with them.
I did not know that.
It's absurd. It's like so bad.
Yeah. Again, that's like part of the whole like hortifying an army that
was already a bad buy.
Yeah.
It may have been above Sisters or tied with Sisters, and now it's just way below. Same with Tau. They might have not been in the bottom 5, and Gene Stealers was probably in the bottom 5 before they ate all those point increases. But like, either way, it was fucked up. It's just slightly different now.
Exactly.
But Death Guard is a great example of hortifying, dropping it down to the danger zone with horde armies like Orcs and Gene Stealers and all that.
Yeah, especially when like, it's one thing to further hortify an army that's kind of already doing that. It's a whole other thing when you're like Death Guard. From a balance aspect, it is better to have a properly point costed model that you can play and not feel like you're getting your eyes gouged out, but at the same time, it's not really what you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. So getting into like armies that are way too small and need fixing.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them. Basically everybody other than Space Marines.
There's a lot, but let's look at them. Armies that you can't have more than 4,000 unique points of is still half the game. So we're only going with purchasable, not out of print right now, okay?
Okay.
Leagues of Votann can only field 1,200 unique points.
Yeah, I mean, it's half an army.
Gene Stealer Cults, 1760.
Fair.
Drukhari, 1775.
Yeah.
Custodes without Forge World, 2,270. AdMech with 29 data sheets, 2,575.
Oh, man.
Sororitas with 32 data sheets, 2,800 on the dot. And then, like, Chaos Knights only has 10 data sheets, but technically it's 3,000 points because they're huge data sheets.
Yeah, like, the Knights don't count.
Here's a fucked up one. Tau has 37 data sheets and still barely breaks 3,000 points.
Given all of what we've talked about, yeah.
Shows the ratio. That's how you get the ratio, is you have to have a ton of dollars to buy that many points.
It still feels wrong even after we've gone through this entire thing. Part of it is like, it doesn't seem like Tau has that few.
Yep.
You know, like it's a primary Xenos army. It should have more, right? Than a sub-chapter of Space Marines.
Yep. And then, again, Death Guard, World Leaders, Grey Knights all can't field 4,000 points. Thousand Suns better than Grey Knights by 75 points.
Hell yeah.
Right over the 4,000 line.
Just barely squeaking by.
All the armies I just mentioned, I would like to see get more kits.
Yeah.
I'll throw Imperial Knights in there too, just because they get a lot of points, but that's because there's 2 separate versions of what is the Knight Tyrant if you're Chaos Knights.
I feel like the Knights are their own kind of thing. Like, if you want to release a Knight, sure, that's cool. People enjoy it. But I don't think it needs more, just because like it doesn't need additional ones that are not unique and interestingly cool. Like the last one that came out for Chaos Knights,
Abominant.
Yeah, that one was unique and cool and interesting, and that's what Knights should be. It shouldn't be about, you know, filling out units for the gameplay. Knights aren't balanced. They're never gonna be for gameplay. We can get them close, we can have them playable and fine, and that's nice and that's great, and we should keep trying, but they're there for centerpiece models. They're there for, look at this cool thing.
Ignoring Knights then, let's add Harlequins in their place.
Yeah.
Rebirth the unbirthed army.
I'm totally on board with that.
So, Harlequins, Leagues of Votann, Gene Stealers, Drukhari, Custodes, AdMech, Sororitas, Tau, Death Guard, World Leader, Grey Knights, Thousand Suns. All of those could use more love. Things that don't need more love. Stop making more goddamn Space Marines. Also, IG doesn't really need anything at this point from a datasheet or point standpoint, although it's slightly bloated because of all the variants being different now. You could make some argument. Demons looks very healthy, but unfortunately all of it is in characters. Necrons, again, there's a couple toys that we would like, but it's pretty solid. It has a lot of named characters as well. Same with Eldar, but they've got a ton of datasheets too. Orcs, same deal, pretty healthy army.
Yeah, I think it really is one of those, like, Eldari, Orcs, Necrons, Tyranids. You can always use some more interesting things, but they don't need, like, here's a new range to expand 10 new data sheets, this new wing of the army.
Yeah, sure. That's how you would expand those. Not like core things are missing, which is more the case when you get down to, like, World Eaters. And it's rough, because a lot of the armies I named that are on the low end are also armies that are not popular because they're unloved. We saw what happened with Necrons. Necrons was unpopular and unloved. Necrons is now probably one of the most popular armies in the game because they were given love and everyone bought them.
So it's one of those, like, chicken and the egg kind of which come first thing, but at the same time,
it's hard to convince a company, like, you gotta put in the money to get out the money. If you finish Leagues of Votann, people will be more happy to buy Leagues of Votann.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing for, like, World Eaters.
World Eaters is the most insane example.
It was all fucking on a silver platter for you to do.
There's more stuff in the lore that you wrote because they're a space marine.
Yeah, and you just didn't do it.
You didn't even give them their Terminators, which have a name. It's the Red Butchers. World Eaters is the most unexpectedly scuffed launch I think they've done ever in the recent era. We know that AdMech had their halvesy launch and then the other half came out. Same with Sororitas, all of that. I get that. But, like, World Eaters, this was an easy slam dunk for you. You took away options they were already running.
And you know how to do Space Marines. Just do that and then put some spikes on them.
That's the most confusing one to me.
You know how to do Space Marines. You've got 220 already examples of it.
You gotta count all the CSM ones too, Eric.
Yeah. That's true. And, like, if you look at, like, a bunch of the armies of the Imperium that are basically Space Marines that just have slightly differences.
It's a lot. Over half the game is fat Marine in power armor man, usually missing a torso until the Primaris era. I hate old Marines. They're ugly as sin. I will not miss you. All right, that should be enough stats. There's more to this. Like, I even had an average dollars per unit, average points per unit in each army. Fascinating stuff that I could keep going on. We could get into the weeds on different role types.
You can get into, like, try and make a list for your army that's the worst value.
Yeah, you could do all the funny memes too. I'm sure people can take this data and go do that. We might come back for a fun episode when we've got nothing else that we want to cover for a week and do something fun like that. Have fun with this data. Go wild with it. Share things that you find. All sounds fun to us. If you're on YouTube while you're down there sharing your own findings, drop us the YouTube pleasantries. They all help. And before we go, special thanks again to all of the patrons who helped me put this together. You all have more work coming your way. The only reward for good work is more work.
And while you're down in the YouTube comment section, if you've gotten this far, remember to comment that Leagues of the Votann is the most expensive army, just for everybody else who wasn't paying attention.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. Misinformation.
Yeah.
All right, but let's get out of here for the week.
Sounds good.